The room is quiet in a way that only follows catastrophe. Not silence, never silence, but a hollow stillness, broken by distant screams that no longer feel close enough to help. The floor is slick. The air tastes of ash and metal. Someone is breathing too fast in the dark, trying to make their body smaller, trying to disappear into stone that has watched emperors rise and fall. Outside, a city is dying. Inside, a choice is about to be made that no one here will ever speak of honestly again. This story is not about a battle. It is not about victory or defeat. It is about what happens after the walls collapse, when rules that once felt eternal are suddenly optional. It is about power at its most exposed. When cruelty is permitted, mercy is unnecessary, and every decision becomes a mirror. What kind of ruler is born in that moment? For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople had existed as an idea as much as a place. A city that called itself eternal. A capital that believed survival was proof of divine favour. Empires had clawed at its walls and broken themselves apart trying to take it. Its people learned to think of history as something that happened to others. But by the mid-15th century, the illusion was cracking. The empire that ruled from this city had been shrinking for generations, hollowed out by civil wars, economic decay, and religious fracture. Its territory was a shadow of what it had once been. Its armies were thin. Its treasury was empty. What remained was the city itself, crowded with memory, ceremony, and the dangerous belief that endurance alone could substitute for strength. Beyond the walls, a new power had been growing with patient discipline, a state forged through conquest, loyalty, and adaptation. Its leaders learned quickly, borrowed ruthlessly, and understood that survival depended on change. Where the old empire looked backward for legitimacy, this one looked forward for opportunity. At its head stood a young ruler with something to prove. He had inherited power early, lost it, regained it, and spent his adolescence surrounded by men who doubted him. Soldiers who measured leadership in scars, advisors who remembered his father's authority and wondered if the son could ever match it, foreign courts that dismissed him as a boy playing at empire. He studied obsessively, history, philosophy, languages, not because he admired the past, but because he wanted to own it. He understood something many conquerors never did, that taking a city was easy compared to holding its meaning. Constantinople was not just stone and population, it was legitimacy made visible. Whoever ruled it could claim inheritance over centuries of law, culture, and imperial authority. To destroy it completely would be to inherit nothing but ruins. The siege tightened slowly. Day after day, the sound of artillery rolled across the fields, shaking walls that had never known such weapons. Inside the city, defenders repaired breaches through the night, filling gaps with rubble, timber, and bodies when nothing else remained. Bells rang until people stopped hearing them, prayers repeated until words lost their shape. Every citizen understood the unspoken truth. If the city fell by force, the laws of war were clear. Restraint would vanish, status would not matter, protection would not exist. Families prepared the only ways they could. Some hid valuables, some sharpened knives for themselves. Some tried to erase what made them visible, cutting hair, trading fine clothing for rags, smearing soot onto skin to dull it. Hope narrowed to a single, fragile question. Not whether the city would survive, but whether they personally would. The final night came without ceremony. In the great cathedral, people crowded together beneath gold mosaics that reflected candlelight like stars. Old divisions dissolved in the face of fear. Arguments that had divided churches for centuries suddenly felt irrelevant. Parents held children who did not understand why adults were crying. Priests spoke words they had spoken all their lives, now unsure if anyone was listening. Outside, the sound began low and rhythmic. Drums, voices, tens of thousands of them, answering one another in the dark. Inside the palace, sleep was impossible. Stone corridors echoed with footsteps that went nowhere. Somewhere a woman took scissors to her daughter's hair with hands that would not stop shaking. There was no poetry in it, no ritual, just survival stripped to instinct. At dawn, the assault began. It did not come all at once. It came in waves, each one designed to drain, to exhaust, to break nerve as much as muscle. The first attackers died quickly. The second learned where defenders were weakest. The third arrived when arms were heavy and minds were already bending toward despair. Then something small went wrong. A gate, a lapse, a moment no one would admit to later. Enemy banners appeared where they should not have been. Panic moved faster than orders. Men abandoned posts not because they were cowards, but because they were human. Because fear spreads more efficiently than courage ever does. By mid-morning, the walls were irrelevant. What followed defied counting. Violence without choreography. Soldiers flooding streets they had dreamed of for weeks. Homes forced open, families dragged apart. The law had vanished, replaced by appetite. People who had lived quietly for decades discovered how quickly civilization peels away. In one quarter, smoke swallowed entire neighborhoods. In another, bodies lay where they fell, already being stepped over. In the great church, sanctuary became a trap. Doors that had once symbolized refuge now held people in place, until armed men broke through and chose who would be spared for profit and who would be discarded. This is the part history often flattens. Numbers replace faces. Atrocity becomes abstract. But inside the captured palace, something else was happening. The new ruler did not rush to destroy what he had taken. He rode into the city deliberately, moving through ruins with calculated restraint. He observed, he listened, he noted what still stood and what had already been lost. He understood that uncontrolled violence, if allowed to run its course, would leave him ruling over a corpse. Before the customary days of plunder had passed, he gave an order that shocked his own commanders. The killing would stop. Looting would end. Anyone still hiding would be spared. Some soldiers protested, many did not understand, but orders were orders. This was not mercy born of compassion. It was strategy born of ambition. The city needed people, administrators, craftsmen, clergy, a population that could be governed, taxed and absorbed. He was not there to erase history. He was there to inherit it. Captured nobles were brought forward, one by one. Some begged, some stood numb. Some expected death and were surprised to find themselves breathing minutes later. Among them was a girl who should not have been there at all. She had hidden well. Too well, perhaps, long enough to believe it might work. But refinement has a way of surfacing under pressure. A voice too controlled. Hands unused to labour. Eyes trained to read rooms rather than escape routes. She was brought into a hall that no longer felt imperial. The floor was damaged, the walls stained. Power had shifted, but the space still remembered what it had been. The ruler spoke to her calmly. In her language, he asked who she was, what she knew, whether she could read and write, whether she understood the world she now stood in. Those present expected a familiar outcome. This was how conquest had always worked. A captured city produced spoils, and noble captives were among the most valuable. Instead, the ruler paused. What he did next would confuse everyone who witnessed it. He did not claim her, he did not sell her, he did not order her death. He ordered her released, not hidden, not disguised, released under protection, given a stipend, allowed to live openly, to practice her faith, to exist as proof that conquest did not require annihilation. The room did not celebrate. It did not protest. It simply absorbed the moment in stunned silence. This decision did not undo the suffering outside. It did not redeem the slaughter or restore what had been lost. Thousands remained enslaved. Entire families were gone. Trauma had already been carved into the city's foundations. But the choice mattered, not because it was kind, but because it was intentional. The ruler was constructing an image of himself as more than a warlord. He wanted to be seen as a successor, an inheritor, a ruler whose authority extended beyond religion and force. He re-established institutions instead of destroying them, appointed leaders from the conquered population, preserved traditions that could be repurposed rather than erased. He allowed continuity to survive where it served him. To later historians, this posed a problem. Western chroniclers preferred a narrative of unrelenting brutality. It justified fear, it justified resistance, it justified future wars. Complexity weakened the story. His own historians preferred tales of unbroken triumph. Mercy suggested vulnerability, calculation, and compromise. None of those fit neatly into legend. So moments like this were buried, reduced to footnotes, ignored entirely. The girl lived, quietly, without ceremony. Her name faded. Her story survived only in fragments, scattered through records no one was eager to read closely. The city transformed around her. Mosques rose beside churches. New laws settled over old neighborhoods. Scholars adapted, merchants recalculated. The population slowly rebuilt, not as it had been, but as something new, absorbed into a system that valued order over memory. The fall of Constantinople rippled outward. Scholars fled west carrying manuscripts that would reshape European thought. Trade routes shifted, ambitions expanded. Within decades, ships would cross oceans in search of alternatives to a world now dominated by new power. One city's collapse altered the trajectory of continents. And yet, what lingers is not just the scale of change, but the psychology behind it. Power does not always express itself through maximum cruelty. Sometimes it reveals itself through restraint, because restraint communicates confidence, because mercy, when unnecessary, can be more unsettling than violence. The ruler did not spare that girl because he was gentle. He spared her because he understood symbolism, because legitimacy depends on continuity, because empires survive not by erasing the past, but by absorbing it and redefining it. This is the uncomfortable truth history resists. Atrocity and calculation can coexist. Suffering can be real without defining every action that follows. Survival does not always belong to the innocent or the brave, but to those who happen to be useful to someone powerful at the right moment. When we simplify the past into heroes and monsters, we miss how often the world is shaped by people making cold, strategic choices in rooms that smell of smoke and blood. Imagine that hall again. The conqueror and the captive, both young, both trapped by expectation, both aware that history is watching, even if no one will write this part down. Honestly. Outside, a city mourns itself. Inside, the future is being negotiated in silence. If this story unsettles you, it should, because it reminds us that survival is not always moral and power is rarely simple. The past we inherit is not clean. It is layered, compromised, and shaped by decisions made under unbearable pressure. If you value stories that resist easy answers, stories that force us to sit with discomfort rather than escape it, consider subscribing for more deeply researched historical documentaries. And if this account disturbed you, ask yourself why. Was it the violence, the restraint, or the realization that history's darkest moments are often defined not by what was destroyed, but by what was deliberately allowed to remain? Let us know what lingered with you, and tell us which moment of history you believe still hides truths we are not ready to face.